All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to be in the 147-pound division where Errol Spence Jr. speaks out via illustration about backstabbers in boxing ahead of his rematch with Terence Crawford, and it is something that is echoed that I believe works perfectly in time with what a very successful and popular trainer, Stephen Breadman Edwards, had to say about fights like Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to be in the 147 or 54-pound division, where Errol Spence Jr. is now is according to sources in training for real, preparing for his rematch fight at 154 pounds, presumably against Terence Bud Crawford. And on his Instagram, he released a illustration of a man looking and smiling at his daughter, presumably his daughter, could be a niece, I guess, but it's more than likely it looks like a father and a daughter. And on his back, he has a series of arrows slung into his back, which would tell you what? That this is, if Errol Spence Jr. is doing this, he's looking at his family. He has his focus on his family, on his children, and he has a smile on his face, and he's ignoring all these people shooting arrows at his back. Now, this is leading into the Terence Crawford rematch, which should be taking place in the first quarter of this year. I have a suspicion it's going to be around April, but it reminded me heavily of another tweet that was released by Stephen Breadman Edwards, in which he talked about fans and fighters and why, at least is the interpretation that I got from it, why fighters sometimes should ignore what fans want. And he gives a very good reason for it, and it is directly connected to the arrows in the back of Errol Spence Jr. Now, before I get into the details, please let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, please accept my invitation to hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And if you're a longtime subscriber and supporter of the channel, thank you guys so much for your support. It really means a lot. And shout out to Coach Ari. If you have a chance to watch this video, I am working on that t-shirt. I did not forget, haven't seen you in a while. So I hope this video catches you. If anybody watches and knows Coach Ari, make sure she hears that. But let's get into this, because I think this is kind of an important thing as a boxing fan. And one of the things that I do believe stands in the way of fights as much as anything else. People like to blame Floyd Mayweather Jr. for the fact that there are fights that we want to see that do not take place in boxing, and that everybody is looking at the money for the fight and talking about gates and talking about pay-per-views and all of that stuff, right? They say, well, the reason is because Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s career was, he cherry picked, and I'm not agreeing with this, I'm just repeating what people say. He cherry picked and he picked and chose who he wanted to fight in the last several years of his career. So everybody wants to be him, so they don't want to fight these guys. If we look at what's going on with Errol Spence Jr. ahead of this Terence Crawford fight, I beg to differ. And so I bring up a tweet that came from Stephen Breadman Edwards, who says, in essence, that boxing fans do determine the money and the popularity of a fighter and the economics/money of a fighter, right? And fight fans drive that for certain. However, boxers, what happens when a boxer takes a fight that fans want them to see, and then when that fighter loses, they turn on them. They talk about him, and this is me paraphrasing, they turn on the fighter and they stab the fighters in the back because they took on a tough fight and they didn't win. So, and the implication being, don't blame fighters if they don't get in the ring and fight the toughest fights in the world, because you are not going to give them credit for it. All you're going to do is, all a lot of boxing fans do, are going to rip them apart for it. Perfect case in point is Errol Spence Jr. And I listened to two people just yesterday, and it really, I'm not going to say who they are because sometimes people get offended by that, and it is what it is. But it was a boxer who is a 12-0 boxer that was a sparring partner for Terence Crawford and sparred Jaron Ennis, right? And the other one is a trainer in a gym on the East Coast. And the trainer literally called Errol Spence Jr. an average fighter. And I thought to myself, Errol Spence Jr. is an average fighter? He said Terence Crawford cannot beat Errol Spence because Errol Spence is just an average fighter. Errol Spence Jr. will beat the brakes off that dude. Errol Spence Jr., unless he really is diminished because of all kind of other stuff, will beat the brakes out of 99 out of 100 welterweights. How in the world could you possibly say that a man that has accomplished all of those things, fought 3 belts, won 3 belts, then gave you the fight that you wanted, which is one of the biggest fights to take place this decade, is an average fighter? You have the sparring partner just acting like Javon, talking about Errol Spence like he's trash. Then you hear other people talking on YouTube and YouTube commentaries like Errol Spence Jr. is washed up, he's garbage, he's this, he's that. So the next guy that comes around, now you can say all that stuff is true if you want to say it's true. But when Gervonta Davis looks at Devin Haney and says, no, I'm not fighting you at 140. I'm not fighting you at 140 pounds. And no, I'm going to fight you with a rehydration clause where you don't get any higher than 155 pounds. When we fight at 135, and I'm taking every nickel and dime. Because why wouldn't he? If you have boxing fans that are not going to give him any credit if he wins, then you're going to rip him apart if he loses and tear his name down every single solitary day in the media. Then why in the world wouldn't he take every bit of money he possibly can out of that fight, put every single solitary thing in that contract that will protect him in that ring against that guy, but not just for the fight, but for all of the ramifications that will come if he was unfortunate enough to lose, which, by the way, 99.999999 for a while, keep them nines going for a while, of boxers do at some point in time in their career. They can be the greatest fighter in the world. As soon as they lose, they're absolutely positively garbage. Deontay Wilder lost pretty much a boring fight with Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker landed a few big shots, but other than that, there was nothing eventful in that fight. And here out come the Deontay Wilder trash cans. Right? Same thing. You got boxing media people doing the same thing, talking about, oh, this is such a hard year on these guys. Steve Fulton Jr. lost. Errol Spence Jr. lost. Jermell Charlo. Oh, man, what a horrible year for the cult. Dude, there's a bunch of PBC fighters that won also. So does that make it a good year? There's a bunch of Robeisy Ramirez got knocked off. If I spent enough time and thought about enough fighters on Top Rank where people cared, well, why aren't they losing? They're not losing because they're not taking fights that are big fights. Every one of those PBC fighters that you're talking about lost actually went out of their way to fight guys, and they were all underdogs. Errol was an underdog to Terence Crawford, and Terence Crawford was the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Steve Fulton Jr. was an underdog to Monster Inoue, and Monster Inoue was ranked as one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And Jermell Charlo was a massive underdog against Canelo, and Canelo has been in the top 10 pound-for-pound for like a decade. But they're all trash, and what a terrible year. It was a terrible year because they took fights that boxing fans said that they wanted to see, and they were the underdogs in those fights, and they lost. Don't be surprised if boxers listen to what you say and do not give you the fights that you want, because who cares what you think? They're damned if they do, damned if they don't. So they might as well don't. And get the money and keep winning and keep winning and keep winning. Because at least when they don't take those fights, they get more fights. Maybe you should treat fighters with a little bit more respect, but it is what it is. That's my take on the matter. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.